Her body no longer reacted as before. It wasn't just hunger. There was a different kind of weariness, deeper, that didn't go away when she sat down or closed her eyes. It spread slowly, starting in her legs, rising up her back, tightening her chest as if the air had become heavier. The female body learned, day after day, to remain alert even when nothing was happening. The silence never came empty. Even when no one spoke, there was a clear feeling of being watched, not by visible eyes, but by something constant, motionless, that never slept. A silence that never rested. The kind of silence that makes the body shrink without realizing it, that teaches the shoulders to tense up, that prevents thought from stretching out. Thinking too much seemed dangerous. They already knew how to recognize this state. It didn't have a name, but it was familiar, an internal warning that what hurt now wasn't the worst. The hunger was known, the cold too. The new fear was what came next, the expectation of something that didn't yet have a form, but that already occupied space inside their chests. Something worse was yet to come, not because someone had said so, because the body learned before the mind. Time passed in a strange way. It didn't rush, it didn't stop. It just weighed heavily. Each minute seemed to demand physical effort just to exist. Breathing was a conscious act. Swallowing hard was frequent. The body reacted to small sounds, distant footsteps, almost imperceptible changes in the air. Nothing needed explaining. Fear didn't ask for more details. It was there, whole enough. There were times when no one spoke for long periods. No orders, no shouts, no gestures. And yet, no one relaxed. The silence kept everyone trapped. Trapped in their own bodies. Trapped in waiting. Trapped in the idea that any wrong move could draw attention. Fear no longer needed explanation. It had already been learned. They didn't know exactly what to expect. They only knew they weren't expecting something good. The war had taught them that with cruel patience. First, it took away control. Then, it taught them to anticipate pain. The female body there lived in that interval, between what had already been lived and what had not yet happened, between the now bearable and the feared later. Nothing was happening, and that brought no relief. Over time, the body began to make associations without asking permission. Uniforms came to signify punishment even before a word was spoken. The color, the fabric, or the symbols didn't matter. The form was enough. The mere presence was enough. Something inside automatically shut down, as if the body knew that this was the moment to become smaller, more discreet, more obedient. The notion of choice slowly dissolved. First in the small things, where to stand, when to get up, where to look. Then in the bigger things, the body itself ceased to seem personal. It became an object under external rules, subject to commands that didn't need to make sense. There was no need to understand. Understanding didn't help. Survival demanded something else. Obedience didn't come from respect. It came from the silent calculation of risk. The body learned to respond before the mind could even formulate questions. One step forward, one step back. Stop, wait. Each movement was executed as if it had already been rehearsed many times. There was no room for improvisation. Improvising was costly. Shame settled in silently. It wasn't announced. It only appeared when it was necessary to accept orders that crossed internal boundaries. Simple orders, short orders, orders that didn't ask for consent. The shame didn't come from what was done, but from the absence of choice, from realizing that acceptance had become the only way to continue existing there. Resistance seemed like a distant, almost abstract idea. Not because there was no will, but because war had taught repeatedly that all resistance came at a higher price than the body could pay. The fear wasn't just of immediate punishment. It was of what came after, of what would remain as a mark, of what couldn't be seen, but was carried. Thus, the body adjusted. It learned to lower its gaze. It learned to wait for the next command. It learned not to react. Each day reinforced the same lesson. The less it showed, the greater the chances of going unnoticed. It wasn't dignity. It was strategy. A silent strategy, built to get through another day. None of this needed to be said aloud. They all knew. The body taught before the words, and what the war had taught them to fear was not easily forgotten. The wait began without warning. No explanation, no words to indicate how long it would last, just the feeling that now it was necessary to stay there. Still, attentive, the body understood that it was not an ordinary interval. It was a heavy, burdensome weight, as if the air had thickened inside the enclosed space. Time began to drag on. There was no clock. There was no point of reference. Each minute seemed longer than the last. The body felt before it counted. Legs stiffened. Backs ached. The The weight of one's own body became uncomfortable. Changing position drew attention. Remaining still required effort. Nothing seemed comfortable. Nothing seemed safe. The mind tried to keep up, but lagged behind. The body reacted first. A distant sound made the stomach clench. A movement outside the field of vision quickened the breathing. The heart didn't wait for confirmation. It simply responded, as if it had learned that anticipating was safer than understanding. Without information, imagination filled the empty space. It created scenes. It created possibilities. It created punishments that did not yet exist. The silence offered too much time to think about what could happen. Thinking did not bring relief. Thinking amplified the fear. The absence of words allowed anything to be possible. There was also the fear of disappearing there, that this waiting wouldn't just be a pause, but an oblivion, that no one would come, that no one would ask, that there would be no record whatsoever. Existing without being seen had already been difficult before. Existing and being forgotten seemed worse. The silence stretched on. It wasn't accompanied by screams, but it offered no rest. On the contrary, it demanded constant attention. Every second seemed to ask if now was the moment. Now, or now. The body remained ready, even without knowing why. Nothing was happening. Time went on, and the silence remained. It came short, direct, without any explanation. A simple order, delivered as if it carried no weight, as if it had no history. The kind of command that didn't allow for questions. The sound of the words was enough to make the body react. The heart raced before the meaning was fully understood. The panic seemed contained, suppressed inside. There was no room to show it. Drawing attention was dangerous. Each muscle seemed self-aware, trying to obey without error. The body wanted to move too fast or not move at all. Neither option seemed safe. There was a brief, almost invisible conflict. To obey immediately or hesitate for one more second. A second might seem like nothing. But there, a second was a risk. Memory interfered. Other simple orders had ended badly. Orders that also seemed neutral at first. Orders that didn't warn of the cost they would incur. The body remembered even when the mind tried not to. It remembered the tone of voice, the way the words were spoken. It remembered what came after. The memory didn't come in clear images, but in sensations. Tightness in the stomach, sudden heat, tension in the shoulders. The past presented itself as a physical warning. Any reaction seemed liable to be used against them. Movement that was too fast could be seen as a challenge. Movement that was too slow could be seen as resistance. Balance was fragile. Walking on it required absolute attention. There was no neutral gesture. Everything could be interpreted. Thus, the body chose what seemed least dangerous at that moment. Not out of trust, not out of conviction, but because remaining still was also a choice, and perhaps the worst one. The simple order continued to echo, not for what it said, but for what it promised. Something was about to happen. It wasn't clear what, but the body knew that control was a door, and doors, there, really led to safe places. There was a brief moment when what happened didn't match what was expected. The body perceived it before any conclusion could be drawn. Something was out of the learned pattern. The tone wasn't the same. The gesture didn't follow the known sequence. The logic of war seemed to have failed for a second. The expected violence did not come. Not immediately. Not in the way that memory had prepared the body to endure. This delay caused strangeness, not relief. The absence of impact created a void difficult to interpret. The body remained tense, ready for the blow that still seemed inevitable. The gesture that emerged was neutral, neither aggressive nor welcoming. Just a common, almost mechanical gesture. Precisely for that reason, it caused discomfort. Nothing in previous experience had taught her to trust neutral gestures. They were usually preparation for something worse. The mind tried to find the hidden threat there. Trust seemed impossible. The idea of humanity sounded dangerous. War had taught that any sign of care could be a trap. The body resisted the simplest interpretation. It preferred to remain alert rather than be deceived by a moment of full security. The silence remained, but now it carried a different weight. It was no longer just waiting. It was doubt. Doubt about what was happening, about what it meant, about what might still come. The body did not relax. It simply waited, trying to understand if this moment was a real pause or just the beginning of something more difficult to bear. Nothing made complete sense. And there, when something didn't make sense, fear found room to grow. It was something minimal, so small that, outside of that context, it might not have attracted any attention at all. A simple, almost automatic act of care, performed without words. There was no solemnity in the gesture. There was no apparent intention to comfort. Yet, it struck with unexpected force. The body reacted in a confused way. It wasn't physical pain. It was something else, deeper, harder to pinpoint. That care exposed, all at once, everything that had been missing before. It revealed how much they had been deprived of basic human things, almost forgotten. The comparison came uninvited, and it hurt. Hunger had been constant. So had the cold. But this happened differently. It revealed a contrast impossible to ignore. A simple act was enough to dismantle the resistance built with so much effort. The collapse wasn't visible. It happened from within. A silent slide, controlled just enough to avoid overflowing. Dignity seemed threatened right there, at the very moment that should have brought some relief. Accepting the gesture meant acknowledging how much had been lost before. Refusal was not an option. The body remained motionless, trying to hold onto something that was already cracked. There was a belated realization. It didn't come in the form of an elaborate thought, but as a sudden weight. The clear perception of everything that had been taken away little by little, until one could hardly remember what it was like to live any other way. The small gesture didn't give anything back. It only illuminated the absence. Nothing was said. There were no adequate words. Silence returned to fill the space, now different, denser, more burdened. The body remained there, feeling the impact of something that didn't hurt the skin, but left marks that were difficult to erase. Nothing went back to normal after that. Even when the body was removed, something remained. A mark that didn't appear on the skin, but interfered with the simplest gestures. Survival didn't erase what had been felt. It only allowed it to be carried forward, in silence. Accepting humanity after the trauma proved difficult, not because it had completely disappeared, but because it began to seem unstable. Something that could appear and disappear without warning. The body learned to distrust even what seemed safe. The care received did not erase the past. It merely coexisted with it, creating a tension that was difficult to resolve. Even when the war ended, the body continued to remember. It reacted to sounds, to long pauses, to unexpected gestures. Memory wasn't organized by dates or events. It lived in the body, in the muscles, in the breathing that sometimes shortened for no clear reason. The official end didn't mean an internal end. There was also the memory of a boundary that wasn't crossed, a point where something different happened, not enough to fix everything, but enough to remain, not as consolation, as a silent reference. Proof that, even there, choices were made that didn't follow the worst possible path. None of this turned into a discourse. There was no clear conclusion. What remained was presence, consequence, a silence that was no longer the same as at the beginning, a silence that carried everything that had happened without needing to be explained. And that's how it ended, not with words, but with the weight of what continued to exist afterward. Some people move on, others stay a little longer. The stories continue here for those who choose to stay.